good entrepreneurs focus on a problem, not a product. There's a lot of myth that entrepreneurship is a solo sport. It's not. We take wealthy senior corporate executives who are not very happy at work and turn them into poverty-stricken entrepreneurs.
Oh, shut up or get off the pot. This is exactly what today's guest, John Mullins, was told by his wife when he wouldn't stop talking about quitting corporate.
It's hard to leave the trappings and the perks and the company car and the money and say, I'm going to start from square one.
This ultimatum launched a journey spanning 4 decades, 3 ventures, and 4 best-selling books.
I don't know if I can remember them all without taking a quick look at the list.
John Mullins spent years helping build the gap before getting his PhD and becoming one of the world's most sought-after entrepreneurship professor at London Business School.
I think as you think about an opportunity for a new venture, what you want to do is ask yourself 3 pretty fundamental questions.
In this episode, John shares why recessions are the best time to start.
Number 1, you're going to have less competition. Number 2, you can get talent and get it for less.
What makes entrepreneurs fundamentally different from corporate executives?
The academics who studied that question couldn't find any differences. But I know there are differences. And it turns out there are 6 sort of fundamental counter-conventional mindsets. First one is...
Today, John will show you exactly where corporate thinking ends and entrepreneurial thinking begins. Before we get into it, I am Filipova. I quit my 25 years banking career to build a portfolio career and find financial and personal freedom. And this is Change is Possible podcast, where I talk to people to help you do the same thing. And this is Professor John Mullins today. Hey, John. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. I'm very excited. I'm interviewing you for this podcast. Welcome.
Happy to be here, Annie.
Great. So I know a lot about you, but for those who don't know about you, can you just briefly say who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm a professor of management practice. I teach and study entrepreneurship at London Business School. I've been at LBS since 2000. In my earlier life, I was in the retailing industry in the U.S. I worked for a big supermarket chain in Chicago, then joined a small company called the Gap Stores, which I helped make a little bigger. Did a couple startups after that. And after, 20 years or so in the retailing industry, I said, that's enough years in this industry. I should do something else in the second half of my life. And I went back to school, got a PhD, and here I am. I'm a professor today. Yeah.
Amazing. So you have wrote books. You had an amazing TED Talk, which I listened. It's great. You are teaching in the London Business School. Where is this love for entrepreneurship coming from? Why did you decide to study that and to teach that?
I think where it came from is having done it. And so you might ask, well, where did that come from? And I was working in the 1970s, the late 70s, for a then little company called the Gap Stores. And we were in a foot race to get the best shopping mall locations with a competitor. And so we grew very fast. And I loved being in a high growth environment. But as we grew, we became a little more corporate and a little bit less entrepreneurial as things happen. And at one point I started to say to myself, well, maybe I could do this on my own. This is feeling a little different than it was. And I got a new boss at one point, and that's often a catalyst for somebody leaving corporate. And so I came up with a bunch of ideas, and my wife, Donna, one day said to me, John, you ought to either shut up or get off the pot. I'm tired of hearing about this. You should either stop talking about it or you should do it. So I left the Gap.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Great advice.
So I can blame it on Donna, right? That's how I became an entrepreneur. But then when I finished those 20 years or so in the retailing industry and wanted to do something different, I was in my 40s and kind of reflecting on what I should do. I realized that I had really loved the entrepreneurial experience, and at the time, entrepreneurship was really not on the radar in business schools. When I went to Stanford as an MBA a long time ago, I never heard the word entrepreneur, never. Um, so I said, perhaps there's something I can contribute there because I've done it. So that's how it came to be.
Great. So let's get straight into it. My favorite topic. I see so many brilliant corporate professionals who have succeeded, who built career, who build products. They manage huge regions, make billions of revenue, and yet that's not a precursor for success in entrepreneurship. It's a little bit counterintuitive, isn't it? That there's so many brilliant people who absolutely don't know what to do to become an entrepreneur, and they're kind of afraid, and in the same time they are stuck and they hate the things they do, but they continue doing it because they just don't see another way. Isn't that really strange?
It is kind of strange, and actually we see a lot of those people at London Business School. We have a program called the Sloan Masters, which is for mid-career people, typically in their 40s and 50s. And one of the people who works on that program said to me once, you know, what we do on the Sloan is we take wealthy senior corporate executives who are not very happy at work and turn them into poverty-stricken entrepreneurs until they take some steps forward and make it again. Yeah. So yeah, there are a lot of those people around. They're not necessarily happy doing what they're doing anymore for various reasons. But it's hard to leave the trappings and the perks and the company car and the money and the status and all of that and say, I'm going to start from square one. That's not an easy decision for a lot of people to make.
Yep. So what stops them, do you think? All the material things, or is it because they're afraid?
I don't think there's a single answer. Some of them are just risk averse. So many people who work in big companies work there because there isn't much risk there. You know, back in the old days, it was 30 years and a gold watch. You know, that's not true anymore. But still, you know, you've got a good job, you've got a comfortable living, you can pay the school fees, you can do all of that. Why risk any of that? Maybe at a time when your family's, you know, going off to college or something, and you're going to need some money to do that. So you know, a lot of people just aren't enamored of the uncertainty, let's call it, that is always entailed in an entrepreneurial venture. And fair enough, not everybody should be an entrepreneur. So that's some of them. Some of them, I think, just like the perks, and they can kind of go to sleep in their job and get paid pretty well, and you know, let other people do, you know, delegate and let other people do the work. Lots of reasons why not.
But the thing is, the work in the corporates is changing, and there are a lot of layoffs, and there'll be more. There will be automation. I mean, it's inevitable what is going to happen. It will be just the Industrial Revolution all over again, but much faster, right? The Industrial Revolution took hundreds of years. Well, now it's like so fast. Isn't that a very good plan B for people, for corporates, to start something on the side?
I think for some it can be a good plan B, yeah, but you have to be a person who's comfortable with uncertainty, who have a personality that's okay with staring into the unknown. That's just not for everybody. Mm-hmm. But for those who are comfortable with that, and by the way, the best corporate executives are comfortable with that because that's how they got there, right? So they have, many of them have the skills and the mindsets to do that. But then it becomes a question of, okay, so what should I do? When I left Gap in 1980, I faced that question. I had a new boss. I wasn't happy. Donna said, John, you ought to shut up or do something here. I had to figure out, well, okay, what am I going to do? And I figured that out. I got some mid-career career coaching that helped me identify the things I loved to do and the things I was good at. And I found a business in San Francisco where we were living that I thought we could copy in Denver where we were moving. And we did that. And I spent, how many years? 7 years building that business. It ultimately failed. But that was my first solo entrepreneurial experience. The Gap was very entrepreneurial, but it wasn't the same as, running the business on my own.
What was the business? What was the business?
It was called Pasta Via International, and it was a chain of fresh pasta stores. So the customer would stop on the way home from work, buy some fresh pasta, a sauce and a salad and some bread, and they'd have a really nice dinner in a few minutes. And those were the years when carbo loading was all the rage. So pasta was good. Sometimes pasta has been not good, but in those years, pasta was seen as good.
All right. So, so people are listening, watching the podcast, and they're thinking, okay, I want to do something. I don't want to stay here. I want to take my first step. So what should they do? I mean, can you just walk us through step by step? What is the plan for somebody to start something on the side and with a view to live the corporate life later on when that works?
Well, there are two ways to build successful entrepreneurial ventures. One is to solve a compelling problem that some set of customers has. I think that's the best way. Arguably, Starbucks did it a different way. There was no problem getting a cup of coffee in the United States when Starbucks started. You could get a cup of coffee, but that wasn't the issue. They were providing what I would call customer delight, an enhanced customer experience for something that already exists. I think for most would-be entrepreneurs, what you want to do is find a problem to solve. And for people in big companies, you're in a great place to see problems that already exist, right? In the line of business where you are, or problems that your customers have, problems that your employees have. So the best way, I think, is to find a problem and say, well, is this the problem that I'd like to spend a bunch of years solving if I could make it work? And then do that. So I tell my students, carry around a piece of paper or a little thing on your phone that's a bug list. And every day ask yourself, is there something that bugs me about what I experienced today that maybe I could make better? That's one way to go about it. But find a problem is my first piece of advice.
Okay. And what next? How do you distinguish between, how do you know that your idea will work? Or do you ever know that?
The short answer, Annie, is you don't, right? But the longer answer is that you can assess an entrepreneurial opportunity. And that was the theme of my very first book that I wrote in 2003. It's called The New Business Road Test. And I think as you think about an opportunity for a new venture, what you want to do is ask yourself three pretty fundamental questions. Is the market for this attractive? In other words, are there a bunch of customers out there who are going to buy it if I build it? That's question one. Question two is this an industry in which I want to compete? So markets and industries are different things, right? And you want to ask yourself, do I want to be in the retailing industry? Which was, my question. People might have an idea for which there's a market, but in a really difficult industry in which to compete, they might say, no, I don't want to do that. Well, keep looking. And then the third question you have to ask is, what sort of entrepreneurial team is it going to take to do this? And do I bring some of what's necessary to do it to that potential team? And who else do I need? It's, there's a lot of myth that entrepreneurship is a solo sport. It's not when played to win. It's a team sport. So what kind of team am I going to need? And what pieces of that are missing? And who can I find to do that? So you can begin you can begin if you're sitting in a corporate and you have a problem you've identified, maybe you can ask those three questions. And that involves doing some research and talking to customers and getting out into that marketplace and figuring out, have I got something here? That's how you start.
And a lot of people are adamant and they're thinking, wow, is it the right time now? Or they're thinking, oh, I have to take this, I have to learn that and I have to get this certification and it's not the time. So when do you know it's the time? And again, I know you have one very short answer to that, but give me the long answer.
Well, there's two short answers. One short answer, it's never the time. There's always a reason you can find to postpone, taking the bull by the horns. But the other right answer is it's always the time. If you find a problem that some group of customers have, and it's a compelling problem that they want to rip your shirt off to get your solution, then it's time. And interestingly, there's talk about whether we're going to have a recession after this AI bubble we seem to be in.
Yeah.
Recessions are a fantastic time to start a new business because, number one, the big companies are all pulling in their horns, so you're going to have less competition. Number two, people you want to hire are saying, well, I'm probably not going to get promoted because, things are stagnant at my company, so maybe I should look around. So you can get talent and get it for less. Lots of big companies, Hewlett-Packard, Google, many others, were started in the depths of really difficult times. So the question, is this the right time? It's not a question I think an entrepreneur should even answer. Maybe personally, can they take the personal risk of going without an income? That's a fair question. But in terms of time in the marketplace, doesn't matter. If you've got a problem you think you can solve and a way to solve it, people are going to buy, get on with it.
When you were leaving Gap, what was the runway, the financial runway for you to start a business, and how much time did you have saved to, for the business to grow and start generating income?
Good question. So I didn't have a lot of savings at that time, but we lived in a nice house in San Francisco and life was good. We had two little kids. I got to do some consulting work. So one of the things that many people leaving a business do is they find some part-time consulting gigs that put some food on the table while they're working with the rest of their time on their new idea. And that's what I did. And actually the guy who had hired me at Gap had left Gap at about the same time and joined another retailer who was piloting a new venture, and he asked me to work on that new venture. So, that's the kind of stuff that often happens. So you can find some income by moonlighting, or you find some money by tapping your savings if you have some savings, or even better, you get the customers to fund your business. And as you know, Annie, that's one of my books, The Customer Funded Business. Michael Dell didn't have any money when he started Dell, but he asked the customer to pay for the computer before he bought the parts to build the computer. Well, that's pretty smart,
Yeah.
Elon Musk and Tesla, when he joined the Tesla team, they sold 100 Tesla Roadsters for $100,000 a piece. Do the math, that's $10 million revenue, hard cash, paid from people living in California before they built the first Roadster. So, the best thing to do is to get your customer to pay you to start the business. And by the way, if the customer isn't willing to pay you for what you think you want to sell, maybe that's really good information to have early, right?
Exactly. But how do you make the customer pay? Can you talk a bit? Because that's a topic that I'm very curious about, and your book and all the examples you have, they're brilliant. But can we go a little bit deeper into that? Because I'm also very curious for myself.
Yeah. So the customer funded business articulates the half a dozen ways that you can do that. So one way is you just get the customer to pay up front. That's what Michael Dell did, right? A second way is you build a marketplace kind of business. So if you're in a business like eBay or Airbnb or Uber, connecting buyers and sellers, but you don't own the assets yourself, if that's a business that has compelling advantages for both sides of the dyad, the buyer and the seller, then you can build that business with very little or no money. All right, so that's the second way. You build a marketplace business. Uh, the third way, let's see, I don't know if I can remember them all without taking a quick look at the
Exactly.
list in the front of the book. So that's the second way. The third way is you do a subscription business. So we all subscribe to stuff, right? Netflix or the Wall Street Journal or whatever. Well, when do we pay for a subscription? We
In
pay up
advance.
front, right?
Yeah.
Well, so that money can fund the startup and the growth of the business. The third one is what I call scarcity models. So that's what Zara does. So you're probably a Zara customer, and
Yeah. From time
yeah,
to time, my daughter
yeah,
mostly.
maybe your daughter, and your daughter probably knows that if she sees something on sale in Zara that she likes, she better buy it today because tomorrow it's not going to be there. So
Yeah.
Zara makes its goods scarce, very limited stock for a very limited time, and that motivates the customer to buy now.
Mm.
Zara turns its inventory 12 times a year. Gap turns
Wow.
its inventory 4 times a year. Well, you know,
Mm.
turning your inventory in a month when you pay your suppliers in 60 days means you have sold the goods
Yeah.
before you paid the supplier for the goods. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then there's what Bill Gates and Paul Allen did when they built Microsoft. They turned a service business into a product business. So
Mhm.
Microsoft was writing operating systems for all the new PC makers back at the beginning of Microsoft. So that was the service business. And then one day they said, gee, these all kind of look the same. Why don't we just write one? We'll call it Microsoft. We'll call it MS-DOS, and we'll let it be downloaded with the PCs, or you can buy it on a couple of disks. And that's when the value really took off. So, there's a whole book, obviously, the customer funded business, that explains how you do those things. But
Mm.
none of that's rocket science, Annie,
Yeah.
right? It's not rocket science. But if you can get funded that way at the outset, then maybe you can continue to grow that way and never raise money at all. Or perhaps at some point you've built enough traction where it's very clear you're onto something, and then you raise capital to put some fuel in the tank. So it's a
Mm.
great way to start. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have a subscription business. I have a community, which is a
Yeah.
subscription. And
Mm-hmm.
when I started it, I had a waiting list. And in the waiting list, in the first several days, I have hundreds of people. So I said, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the right
Yeah.
track. So that's like testing a little bit.
Yep.
All right. So what is, can you talk about some of the pitfalls for people who are in corporate and they are starting a side business? Something that they should be careful about.
I think you need to be careful about any agreements you've signed with your employer contractually about trade secrets or
Mm.
things like that. Depends on the kind of business you're in and the kind of role you're in, but you have to be careful not to violate the law when you go do
Yeah.
something that you've learned to do at your current employer, right? So you have to be careful of that. But for most people, uh, that's not a barrier. I don't think they're big pitfalls. I mean, when I left Gap, all my Gap friends were still Gap friends after that, and I
Yeah.
did business with some of them. There aren't pitfalls. The pitfall really is the risk that we know about entrepreneurial ventures, which is that most of them fail, right?
Yeah.
Some
Mm.
fail fast, some fail slowly, but the vast majority of them are going to fail, and that's going to happen to you too. So So what you have to do is fail quickly and learn from that. They like to say in Silicon Valley that failure is an education on somebody else's dollar.
Yeah.
So, you fail, you learn some things, you get up, you brush yourself
Yeah.
off, and you go do it again. You could call that a pitfall if you want,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I call it education, actually.
Mm. Um, I'm very curious now, today, I mean, distribution model and lead generation is done through social media, right? It's the best way to reach. Well, there are 4 billion social media accounts in the world. What was it in the past when you were starting your business? How did you generate leads and customers?
Well, I was in the retailing business back when retailing was a brick and mortar business, not an online business, right?
Yeah.
And the way we got customers when we opened a new Gap store was we put the store in the right location. So location for brick and mortar retailing is really crucial, and you need to have people walking by your location and say, "Oh, what's that new store? I'm going to go check that out." That's one thing we did. The second thing we did is we were very focused on what we offered, and we built a really strong brand. And by the time, at the beginning, you don't have a brand, you never do, but over time you build a brand. And when you, in those days, open a new store, people already knew what the Gap was, and they'd say, "Oh, fantastic! Now there's a Gap store near me. I'm going to go check it out." It was different then than it is.
Very, very different. Now it's the entry point is so low. I mean, everyone can start something, and it's actually
But that's a
doesn't require
blessing
a
and a
lot of money.
curse, right? That's a blessing and a curse. Everyone can start something, and that means somebody else around the corner or down the road or across the way is starting what you're starting,
Yeah.
right? And so you're going to have to make sure the customer wants your solution, not the other guy's solution. And that's not so much that's often seen as a question about competition. It really is. It's a question about serving the customer and giving the customer something that the customer can't get today. And if you do that, then you're going to be fine. But still the odds are tough.
Yeah.
You're not going to really know if it's going to work until the customer writes you a check.
Yeah.
That's when you're going to know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it takes time. And as you said, you have to build a brand. And in the beginning, there is no brand. But the corporate professionals, they have an advantage, because if you are a C-suite executive, for instance, and you've been in a big company, that's carry some kind of weight. But you have to be able to kind of transform it and show that you can operate in that new world outside, right? Because there are many people who think they go out and they just behave just like in the corporate job, and it doesn't work at all. It's just immediate crash.
Yeah. Well, one of the challenges, I think, for people who leave a big company to go do something on their own is that most people who've had success in big companies have had that success because they've built a really good team and they've relied on that team to help get stuff done, and that's how you do it. But on day one in your entrepreneurial venture, you don't have a team. You're going to have to do stuff. Some of it dirty work,
Yeah.
You're going to have to clean the toilets. You're going to have to hire people, fire people, do all of that stuff that you didn't maybe do very much of as a person in a big company. And being able to work on your own and work at speed. Decision making in big companies today is very, very slow. It's a problem in big companies, and you can't be slow as an entrepreneur. You got to evolve on a dime, and as you begin to get feedback on what it is you're trying to sell, you've got to evolve very quickly, and not everybody's accustomed to working at that kind of speed.
Yeah. So can we go into what are the key qualities of entrepreneur? And I was watching your TED talk about why entrepreneurs are entrepreneurial. And it was an eye opener because you have all these qualities, but there I didn't expect what you said, right? You started with a question which was like, all right, everybody knows that, and then completely turned it around. So I just want to go through these with you today because I think they are very, very helpful. So what are these qualities that anyone
Yeah,
who wants to start a business should have?
yeah, it's a question. It's a great question, and I call them mindsets, as you know,
Yeah.
Ani. And I wrote the book, Break the Rules. That is the book behind the TED Talk that you saw. I wrote the book because I was kind of reflecting on the research that I'd done over the last 20 years or so at LBS, and the research in entrepreneurship that had preceded me. And, and, and there was a view back in the 80s and the 90s that there weren't any differences between entrepreneurs and successful big business people. There's a lot of research done, and the academics who studied that question couldn't find any differences. But I know there are differences. And I
Yeah.
said a few years ago, maybe I can figure out what those differences are. So I reviewed my work, and it turns out there are 6 sort of fundamental counter-conventional mindsets, as I call them, that characterize the difference between a successful person in a big company and a successful entrepreneur. And you've asked that I run through them, so I will. And the first one is yes, we can. So in a big company, you're supposed to stick to your knitting, right? You're supposed to know what the core competencies are of the business. You're supposed to stay with those things. And if somebody asks you to do something that's outside of that, you're supposed to say, no, we don't do that around here. Well, that's not how entrepreneurs work. An
Yeah.
entrepreneur, if he or she sees a problem that a customer has that maybe they can solve, it doesn't matter that they haven't done that before. They're going to gather the resources, figure out what they need to learn, and they're going to do it. So yes, we can is the first one. The second one kind of gets back to what I said before. Good entrepreneurs focus on a problem, not a product. So I like to tell the story of Nike. When Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman created Nike, they were solving a problem for elite distance runners, right? People who could run pretty much a 4-minute mile. And the problem they had is they got a lot of shin splints from all the pounding on the miles and miles of training. And they got a lot of sprained ankles because they don't run on tracks. They run on dirt roads and country paths and stuff. But the running shoes at the time were made for people running around smooth tracks. So we're going to solve that problem. Well, that's what entrepreneurs do. They solve a problem. They don't think about the product first. But in big companies, it's typically all about the product. You know, there's Diet Coke and there's, Coke Zero and 87 kinds of Coke. You know, there's no solving a customer problem. Come on, give me a break. The third one is what I call think narrow, not broad. In big companies, if you want to do something new, it's got to move the needle. If it's just some little thing that's not going to matter much, they're not going to let you do it because they don't want to spend their time and their money on little stuff that's not going to matter. But for entrepreneurs, the way you want to start is start with a tiny target market, like the Nike guys did. You know, elite distance runners. How big a market is that? People who can run a 4-minute mile. But once you get some success in your narrow target market with a very narrow product line, you begin to learn some things. Nike learned how to get shoes manufactured in Asia. They learned how to take in athlete feedback into the design of the product and the marketing of the product. They learned how to create relationships with the running community and so on. Well, once you learn all that stuff, then maybe you can begin to grow the business. And it was pretty easy to then call John McEnroe and say, should we do tennis? Call Michael Jordan and say, let's do basketball. So you start really narrow, and big company people tend not to think that way. They're always thinking about these big opportunities because they've got to make a pitch to the corporate pot of gold, right? It's going to show it's going to be huge. Don't start huge. Start really small. The fourth one is ask for the cash and ride the float. So I talked about Musk selling a bunch of, roadsters to get in some initial cash. Same thing with Michael Dell. Ask the customer for the money up front, and then use that money to do all the things you have to do. The fifth one, I call it beg, borrow, don't steal. Often, in a big company, if you want to do something new, you have to prepare a plan that says, here's how much we're going to invest, and here are the cash flows we think we're going to get down the road, and we've calculated the return on investment that we think we're going to get, and it passes the hurdle rate, so give us the money, please. Well, entrepreneurs don't think about investing. They think about how to figure out how to get started in their new business without investing. So what can I borrow? So when we started Pasta Via all those years ago, we didn't build a commercial kitchen until we'd already been in business for a year and a half. We borrowed a kitchen that was vacant in the evenings, and we made our products in that borrowed kitchen. Yeah, we paid some rent to do so, but we didn't have to invest in that asset until we had a pretty good idea that Pasta Via was going to work. And then the last one is don't ever ask permission. You know, if you're two guys and you want to start Uber and you're not sure what the laws are going to say about, you know, whether you can do it or not, I'm not saying break laws, but if the laws aren't clear or are in conflict with one another, and there's nothing legal to stop you, then get going. Don't say, could we? If the Uber guys had gone to the regulators in San Francisco and said, would it be okay if we start a taxi company that has no taxis? We're going to disrupt the taxi industry. We wouldn't have Uber today. We might not have a gig economy today. Who knows?
Yeah.
So don't ask permission. Beg forgiveness later. So those are the 6 mindsets, and they're all opposite to the way you think in a big company, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
They're totally opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally opposite. The thing is how easy it is to unlearn this, because I mean, with me, it happened kind of naturally. I mean, I came to that conclusion, but there are a lot of people who don't realize that, and then just I don't know how we can help them.
Well, they can break the rules, Annie.
Exactly. I was just about to say that. I was just about to say that. So, John, from teaching in London, do you see a difference in how people perceive entrepreneurship? Is it moving in the direction of people are thinking more entrepreneurial, or not?
I think so. When I first moved to London in 2000, I think it's fair to say that the word entrepreneur was a dirty word. If you were a parent of a young adult, the last thing you wanted your young adult to do at that time was go be an entrepreneur and take the risks and, you know, encounter all that uncertainty. But I think that's changed in the UK, and I think it's changed in most of the world. And it's changed for a couple of reasons. One, I think there are a lot of role models now that we can think about. So, you know, there's Michael Dell and there's Richard Branson. And in every country, there are high-profile entrepreneurs who have figured out some problem they could solve and gone out and done it and become kind of celebrities in the process. So that's one reason I think it's changed. Another reason it's changed is there's some really good television, Dragon's Den in the UK and Shark Tank in the US, and there are similar programs all over the world. It's kind of fun watching these entrepreneurs pitch these goofball ideas to these people on television and say, well, gee, if that person can do it, you know, maybe I can do it as well. Yeah. So I think those are 2 of the reasons why it's happened. And then the third reason is that we need jobs everywhere. You know, jobs are under assault. The big companies aren't creating new jobs. They're trying to eliminate jobs with AI and with, you know, capital, replace labor with capital. The only people who are going to create new jobs in today's economies are entrepreneurs who run fast-growing businesses that need new jobs, need new people to help that grow. Mm-hmm. So there's a really compelling reason why we need entrepreneurs today, and I think that's becoming more accepted. That's why there are some tax breaks in many countries to help entrepreneurs get started. Some places there are tax breaks to help them grow, which I think is a really good idea. So I think it's changing. Yeah, that still doesn't mean that everybody should be an entrepreneur,
No,
but
absolutely.
I think for those who can find a problem to solve and have the kind of personality that says, okay, I can handle some uncertainty. That's okay with me and with my family.
Yeah.
Um, you know, then I think it's a good time.
Yeah. But the thing is, people say, "Oh, it's uncertain outside of the corporate job." But if you have a corporate job and you're laid off, what's the certainty then?
That's uncertain as well. Right?
Exactly. So I
There is no gold watch anymore in the
exactly
corporate environment. So you might as well you might as well get up and make a difference. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Well, what for people that are listening and watching the podcast, what should they do to start thinking a little bit more in an entrepreneurial way? So even if they don't want to kind of open their own business now, but
Mm-hmm.
what should they do on a daily basis? What should they learn? How should they keep themselves? Actually, how should they create their plan B? The way you wrote, like you in your book, Plan B. How to create that Plan B?
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's a single way to do that. I think if they get to where my mindset was in 1980, where I was ready to move on from the corporate world and do something on my own, if they get to where they're beginning to think about that, then they need to find some time, nights, weekends, whatever it is, to begin thinking about problems they could solve, and then road testing those problems, like I argue in the New Business Road Test. And the reality is that every new venture is nothing more than a bundle of hypotheses, right? I
Yeah.
think this is true, and I think this is true, and if that's true, then might be true, but you have no evidence for any of that stuff. So what you have to do is figure out what those key hypotheses are. Randy Commissar and I call them leaps of faith. What's the leap of faith that you'd have to take for this business to be successful? Um, and 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 then you begin testing those hypotheses, and you can do that nights and weekends. You can test an awful lot of stuff with the internet now.
Yeah.
You can put some stuff online and see if anybody signs up or indicates interest or whatever. We had a guest speaker at a London Business School event in Sao Paulo a few weeks ago who started an interesting business there to break the bus monopolies in Brazil. So it turns out that in Brazil, it's a huge country, right?
Yeah.
There aren't airports everywhere, so the way people travel from city to city is by bus, and all of the bus lines are local monopolies held by influential people. And this guy decided he was going to break that monopoly, and he said, "Well, how can I figure out if I'm going to do this? Well, I'll just create a little website, and I'll offer a trip from city A to city B, and see if I get any replies." And he got something like 1,500 replies to the
Wow.
idea. He hadn't created anything yet, but he said, "Okay, I'm going to do it." So then he said, "Okay, now we'll go find a bus company that'll let us run our first bus." And he found a bus company that would do it. Then and he was really good at promoting all this stuff on the internet. It's called Boozer, like Uber for cars, but this is
Oh,
buses. We call it BUSER, Boozer.
wow.
Anyway, the first bus ride got impounded about a mile down the road, but he had cameras ready and waiting, so they made a big internet spectacle of it. And anyway, that business now runs thousands of chartered buses
Amazing.
from city A to city B. But how did he start? Just by posting that idea uh, and offering it online. So you can do that these days. It's so easy. Yeah, no
Amazing.
reason not to. No reason
Yeah,
not to do it.
exactly. All right. So let's go to people who are actually now young people in their 20s who are thinking, what should I do? Am I going to study? Does education matters that much anymore? Because with AI, the entry level jobs have been dismantled in some industries, right? And I was just recording a episode for my YouTube channel about the becoming a plumber and electrician, and all these blue collar
Yeah,
jobs are bringing so much more money than
exactly.
any other job, because you get out of university, you have this enormous debt, especially in the US, and then you don't have a job. So what do you think? What should be advised to young people? What should they do?
Well, I'm a professor, so I'm
Yeah,
biased. I think
yeah.
education is a great thing, right? Um, we need to. We, we get many things from education. Among them
Yeah.
are an ability to better understand the world around us,
Mm.
to better understand other people who are different from ourselves, and that level of understanding can help you find a problem with which to start a business. So that's one thing that's helpful about education. Another thing more specific to entrepreneurs. So I teach entrepreneurship at London Business School, and people ask us, well, can you transform anybody into an entrepreneur? And our answer is no, we can't do that. We can't see somebody walking by on the sidewalk in front of LDS, pick them up, bring them in, dunk them in the secret sauce, and put them back on the sidewalk, and they've been magically transformed. No, 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 we can't do that. But the challenges that entrepreneurs are going to face are predictable ones. There are challenges about finding and understanding customers. There are challenges about raising money. There are challenges about the barriers to growth and how to overcome them. All those things are predictable. And so we can teach people about what those things are and how other entrepreneurs who faced them before have solved those challenges. And I think that improves the odds. Does it guarantee success? Certainly not. But I think we can improve the odds. So education has many roles to play. Those are two. It's a signal. If you get a really good education, that's a signal to people that you're a smart, motivated person who's likely to be successful. Well, that
Mhm.
signal might help you. It might help you build a team. It might help you raise money. You know, Um, so, yeah, get an education. There's no rush to be an entrepreneur. Go get an education.
Yeah.
Unless you have a problem that you're passionate about solving right now, and that problem exists right now, then get your education first
Mm.
and get a good
But
one.
the gap that the lack of entry level jobs does create a lot of issues. So how would how would students bridge that is the question. And I'm asking you that because many people ask me,
Yeah,
because I have my portfolio career, and they say, okay, so what should I do? And I can't answer. That's why I'm asking you. What would you suggest?
um, well, one of the things they can do is take their world into their own hands, and while they're studying, start looking for entrepreneurial opportunities, begin to assess them, and when they
Mhm.
graduate, get started. Or before they graduate, get started. We have lots of students at London Business School who are working on new ventures while they are studying. And in fact, they use their studies to examine the prospects for the new venture. So that's one thing you could do. Uh, Another thing you can do is what you've said. Uh, think about careers in which you actually produce something with your hands, whether that's a plumber or an electrician or something else. The world needs more people who can do those things, and those kind of roles are not going to go away. We need not cast aspersion on those heretofore, you know, blue collar jobs. They're incredibly important, and being a good plumber, you're going to get paid really well. That not every plumber is a good plumber, just like not every professor and every podcaster is a good professor and podcaster.
Yeah.
but the best of breed are going to be very, very successful. So maybe you find something that's your avocation, and you find a way to get a job in that avocation. And if you're passionate about that because you love it, you're more likely to be successful than others in that arena, and you're going to grow. So I think those are some of the solutions. Yeah, it's a tougher world today. You're right, Annie. But I think those are some of the ways forward.
All right. So that's all I wanted to ask. Thank you very much for your time. It was great speaking with you.
Good
It was
fun
great reading
speaking
your
with you.
book. Thank you very much for the inspiration. I personally learned quite a lot from your book about the customer. I forgot the title.
The customer
Make the
funded
customer to
business.
pay. Yeah,
The
customer funded.
customer
Yeah,
funded business. Yep.
that was an eye opener for me.
Yep.
Thank you so
Good.
much, John. All
Happy
the
to do
best.
it. Thanks for the opportunity, Annie, and maybe we'll see each other soon some
Yes,
other way.
maybe. Why not? Thank you.